They burned her barn to the ground with her father still inside. Just one arrow, wrapped in red cloth, left in the ashes. Smoke curled into the dawn sky as she knelt in the frozen dirt, that same red cloth trembling in her fingers. Behind her, a dozen riders sat silent on their ponies, their faces painted with sorrow, not war. Among them stood the warrior she'd hidden, his eyes fixed on the rising sun, not her. He didn't speak. Not yet. She thought offering shelter had been the right thing. That one act of kindness had felt like saving a life. Now, as the wind carried, the scent of charred wood and death. She wasn't sure if she'd saved anyone at all, and she hadn't yet heard what the tribe came to say. Before we jump back in, introduce yourself and where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The wind always found its way through the cracks in the walls. It didn't matter how tightly she boarded the windows or stuffed the seams with wool. There was always a sighing, whispering presence in that house, the kind that made the hair rise at the back of your neck, as if the past never fully left. Dust rolled in from the open plains, coating the porch boards and settling in her boots. Out here, 6 miles from the edge of town, even the dust felt heavier, older. It settled like judgment. They called it Stone Marrow, the town she once rode into on a wagon full of hope and marriage dreams. Now it was little more than a post office, 2 saloons, and a church with a crooked steeple that leaned like it had given up listening to prayers. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that watched you, the kind that could turn mean if you gave it time. She hadn't been seen in town since early spring. Folks said she was ghosted up on that ridge with nothing but chickens and bad memories. Some said she was a witch. Others said she'd been touched by grief too deep to crawl out of. All of them agreed on one thing. Something wasn't right with Clara Hart. Her left leg dragged slightly behind her, the result of a shattered knee 3 winters ago when her horse was spooked by a train whistle. They pieced her back together, but she'd never dance again. Not that there was anyone left to dance with. Her hair used to be the color of dark honey, pinned up neatly in a braided crown. Now it hung unbrushed most days, streaked with ash from the stove and tangled like prairie wire. Her husband, David Hart, had been a kind man. Too kind. He'd died trying to settle a fight that wasn't his, caught in the crossfire of 2 ranch hands drunk on pride. They buried him under a cottonwood tree on their land, and Clara had been alone ever since. She tried to talk to people after that, brought eggs into town, offered to sew patches or tend the sick, but it was like grief had made her invisible, or worse, untouchable. They didn't meet her eyes, didn't speak her name, and then came the scar, a long, pale line across her jaw, the kind that looked like it came from a blade rather than accident. No one knew what caused it. She never told. But after that, the whispers grew legs. Crazy Clara. Storm-touched. Keeps a rifle by the door and talks to shadows. They weren't all lies. She had a rifle. And sometimes at night, when the wind moaned just right, she answered it back. The days blended. Feed the chickens, boil the water, chop the wood, watch the sun rise, then fall. And all the while, that silence wrapped itself around her ribs like a shawl of thorns. But on the 4th night of the harvest moon, the silence broke. She heard it first. A twig, cracked just beyond the fence line. Not a coyote, not the wind. This was different. Slower. Human. She stepped out onto the porch with the rifle resting across her hips, heart beating like a war drum against her ribs. He was slumped against her barn, breathing hard, blood soaking the side of his shirt. His skin was the color of wet clay, his braids dark and dust-streaked. A Lakota warrior, barely conscious, eyes flickering like candlelight in a storm. She should have turned him in. That's what the town would say, if they ever found out. But something in his eyes stopped her. Not fear, not anger. Something else. A quietness she recognized. Without a word, she hoisted him up and dragged him inside. Before we dive into the story, just a quick note. I'm Thomas, the voice behind this narration. If you enjoy how it sounds, Let me know in the comments so we can keep the same voice in future videos. She laid him out on the kitchen table, lit the lantern, and fetched what little she had left of the laudanum. His breath came in rasps. The wound wasn't clean, but it hadn't hit anything vital. A rifle shot, she guessed, maybe 2 days old. The kind of wound someone dies from when they're too proud to ask for help. But he'd found his way here. By morning, the fever had come. He muttered in Lakota. Words she didn't know, prayers maybe, apologies, names. She stayed beside him, wiping sweat from his brow, holding a damp cloth to his side. She didn't ask why he was there. Not yet. There would be time. Outside, the sun rose again over the ridge, casting long shadows on the dirt. And down in town, word was already spreading. Someone had seen boot prints in the east field. Someone else swore they saw a painted pony tied in the woods. Rumors traveled faster than truth out here. And Clara Hart was about to learn that a single act of mercy could turn the whole prairie against her. The fever broke on the second night. She woke to find him staring at the rafters, lips cracked, hands twitching at his sides like they were reaching for something no longer there. He didn't speak, just turned his head slightly when he saw her and blinked once, slow and heavy, like trying to decide if she was real. She set a cup of water beside his mouth and guided it to his lips. He drank in silence. When he finished, she wiped his chin, then went to sit by the window. The fire was low, but it was warm enough now. The snow hadn't started yet, but she could smell it in the sky. It was the first time she'd sat across from another soul in months, and not felt the weight of expectation. He didn't ask questions, didn't apologize, he just was, and so was she. That night, she didn't close the door to the room where he slept. He stayed 3 days before he spoke. You should have left me. His voice was rough, more gravel than breath. But the words were steady. She looked up from peeling potatoes. I almost did. He didn't smile, just nodded, like he understood something deeper in her than the sentence said. You got a name? She asked. Wicasa. It took her a moment to recognize it as a name, not a word. He didn't offer more. She didn't ask. Instead, she passed him the plate, and they ate in silence. The fire popped and hissed behind them. Her barn creaked in the wind. There was something about the way he moved, even injured, that was different. He didn't walk like the men from Stone Marrow, full of noise and swagger. He moved like someone used to being watched, like the wind or a wolf. Quiet. Coiled. And for the first time in what felt like years, she caught herself wondering if someone might see her the same way. Not the limp, not the scar, just her. She found him fixing her broken gate the next morning. He hadn't asked, just took a hammer and the spare nails and started working, slow and deliberate. She stood on the porch watching him, arms folded, unsure what to say. You don't owe me anything, she said. He didn't look up. That's not why I'm doing it. She wanted to ask what was the reason. But the way he said it, it wasn't a debt he was paying. It was a way of staying grounded. A way of saying thank you without the words. When he finished, he wiped his hands on his trousers and looked at her for the first time that day. Really looked. Her stomach tightened. Not from fear. There was something in his gaze, like he wasn't just seeing her but reading her. The way a scout reads tracks, the way a hawk watches the wind, and just like that, a shift happened inside her. Not loud, not sudden, just different. By the end of the week, Wicasa had moved into the small shed near the chicken coop. She didn't offer. He just went, quietly, once he could walk well enough. She found a wool blanket folded outside her door the next morning. No one said anything about it, but the town noticed. It started with the mailman. Mr. Tellis rode by once a week with the post. He hadn't stepped foot on her property since spring, always leaving the letter bundle wedged in the fence. But this time he came to the porch. Saw smoke from the chimney, he said, shifting in his saddle. Didn't know if you'd finally gone mad or got company. She took the envelope from his hand. Neither. His eyes narrowed. Funny thing, Mr. Doran says he saw a pony tied up by your eastern wood line. Said it had native markings on the hide. Clara didn't answer. Just saying, if folks hear you're keeping strange company, there'll be questions. I've had questions before, she said. Didn't see anyone rushing to answer them. Tellis clicked his tongue and rode off without another word. But that night, Clara didn't sleep. The next day, Wicasa sharpened her hatchet on the porch while Clara hung laundry in the back. She caught herself watching the way the light played against his features, how the scar along his collarbone caught just a sliver of sun. What happened to you? She asked. He didn't stop sharpening. Too many answers to that, he said. Most people don't stay long enough to hear one. She folded the sheet, hands trembling slightly. I lost my husband. 3 years ago. He looked up. You still carry him. I think that's just the price of love. He didn't reply right away. Then quietly, sometimes love means letting go of who you were before. Something in her chest twisted. She didn't have a reply to that. That night, a hawk called from the ridge. Wicasa stood by the barn listening. His body stiffened, his head tilted. What is it? She asked, stepping closer. He pointed toward the tree line. Scouts. Mine. Her breath caught. Here? They won't come closer. Not yet. But they're watching. He nodded once. She stared out into the dark, the firelight flickering against her porch. Somewhere out there, eyes were on her land, judging, measuring. What will they do? She asked. That depends on them. He paused. And on you. She swallowed hard, her throat dry, and for the first time she realized this wasn't just a man with a wound. It was a story with weight, and now she was part of it. The first snow fell 2 days later. Clara stood on the porch, shawl pulled tight, watching the flakes melt into the porch boards. She'd always loved the silence of snow, how it made the world feel softer, quieter. But now it pressed on her like a weight. A warning. That morning someone had nailed a sign to her gate. White scalp trader. She tore it down, fingers trembling. The nail broke off in the wood like a splinter in bone. Her breath fogged the air in angry bursts. Her chickens scattered. At the sudden slam of the barn door, no one was around, but she felt the town watching from miles away. The next blow came when she rode into town, against her gut instinct, to buy lamp oil and flour. She kept her head down, spoke soft to the general store clerk, but even that small errand unraveled. You heard what they're saying, right? The clerk whispered, not kindly. That you're hiding a killer. That the Lakota murdered 3 men near the Bitter Flats, and one of them limped away. A woman's farm's a good place to hide. Clara's stomach dropped. He's not. You'd better be careful, Mrs. Hart. The clerk cut her off, handing her the oil. There are men who don't take kindly to traitors, or to women, who forget their place. By the time she turned to leave, half the store had gone quiet. She mounted her horse without a word, cheeks burning, palms numb. The ride home blurred, her thoughts louder than the wind. That night, someone came. She woke to the sound of shattering glass and rushed to the kitchen barefoot. A bottle of turpentine lay broken across the floor. Through the open window, she could smell kerosene. Then came the laughter, drunken, mean, and fading hoofbeats galloping into the dark. They hadn't set fire to the house, not this time. But they could have. She dropped to her knees, hands shaking as she wiped up the spilled glass with the hem of her nightgown. Her breathing came in fast gasps, and suddenly she couldn't feel her legs. She crawled to the wall, collapsed, and stayed there for hours, staring at nothing. When Wicasa found her, it was near dawn. She was sitting in the snow behind the barn, barefoot, wearing only her nightdress and coat. Her boots lay somewhere behind her, forgotten. He didn't speak, didn't rush. He walked slowly, deliberately, until he stood beside her. She didn't look at him. You didn't have to come, she said, voice flat. He sat down in the snow beside her anyway. You didn't have to help me, he said. She laughed, a bitter, broken sound that caught in her throat. Helping you cost me everything I had left. Did you have anything left? He asked gently. Silence. She turned toward him then. Her eyes were red-rimmed and raw. "Why did you come to me?" He met her gaze. "Because you looked like someone who wouldn't close the door." She swallowed. "Maybe I should have." He said nothing. She buried her face in her hands, shoulders trembling. "I'm tired, Wicasa. So tired of carrying this alone. The stares, the fear, the silence. You don't have to carry it alone anymore." Her hands dropped. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't pleading. He wasn't even reaching for her. He just was there, as steady as stone. They sat like that for a long time. When the sky lightened into soft morning blue, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small pouch. He opened it slowly and placed it in her hand. Inside was a single carved stone, a buffalo etched in bone, a medicine piece. She looked at it, puzzled. "My mother gave it to me when I became a man," he said, "to remind me not to walk without spirit." She stared down at the carving. "Why give it to me?" "Because you forgot who you are, and you need reminding." Her throat clenched. No one had said her name like it mattered in years. No one had looked at her like she was more than a ghost. She looked up. "I don't know if I can forgive them, or myself." "You don't have to. Just don't disappear." A tear slipped down her cheek unbidden, and when he lifted a hand, not to wipe it, but to simply rest near hers, she didn't pull away. He stayed with her that day, not inside, not watching her like a savior, just working the fence, hauling wood, fixing the porch rail that had rotted through. And every time she looked out the window, he was still there, solid, present, not trying to fix her, just standing with her. The first thing they rebuilt was the porch rail. It seemed small, trivial even, but Clara insisted on helping. Her limp slowed her, her hands blistered, but she drove each nail in with something close to fury. Not at Wicasa, not even at the town, at the part of herself that nearly gave in. When the last board was secured, she sat beside him on the steps, hands raw and dust-streaked. She looked out at the snow-covered land, at the hills curled like sleeping beasts beyond the tree line. "You said you were a scout once," she said. He nodded. "For who?" "My people," he said. "Then for a general who wanted to learn their paths. I thought if I helped, I could protect the ones I loved." "Did you?" "No." The silence between them settled like a soft blanket. Then gently she asked, "Do you ever wish you hadn't survived?" His reply was quiet. "Only before I met you." They began clearing the north field after the second thaw. It had been meant for her husband's horses. Samuel had dreamed of a ranch once, before illness took his body and grief swallowed hers. The fencing had collapsed, the stable frame rotted, but together, Clara and Wicasa began again. It wasn't grand, but it was theirs. Some days she handled the saddles, oiling the cracked leather and cursing at her aching back. Wicasa hauled logs from the tree line, moving with that same quiet focus that made the work feel almost sacred. They didn't talk much, but the rhythm between them was easy, like music, with no need for words. One night, as snow returned in thin gusts and the lantern flickered low, Clara opened the drawer by the hearth. Inside was Samuel's last letter, unread. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. Wicasa sat across the room, mending a halter strap. He said nothing. She read aloud, voice wavering. "Clara, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. You always said you weren't strong, but that was never true. You carried me longer than I deserved. Don't let this land bury you. Don't let guilt become your shadow. Build something. Love again. Let yourself live." The paper fell to her lap. Wicasa didn't move. "I didn't know if I was waiting to be punished or forgiven," she whispered. He met her eyes. "Maybe you were waiting for permission." Her breath hitched, and just like that, the fire inside her, cold for too long, flickered back to life. They worked fast that spring. A barn wall rebuilt. the fencing redone. They bought 2 half-starved mares from a passing trader and named them Smoke and Lark. Clara laughed for the first time in months when one of them bit Wikasa's hat clean off. By May, her hair was sun-lightened and wind-tossed again. Her limp was no less sharp, but her back stood straighter. And Wikasa. He had stopped scanning the trees so often. He even slept a full night once, his hand no longer twitching for the knife at his side. They planted wildflowers by the edge of the field, not for anyone else, just for them. But peace never lasts long on land marked by old scars. It started with a rider. Clara was by the creek gathering kindling when she saw the dust. One man, a black coat, silver badge, a hat pulled low. She froze. The sound of her breath was louder than the water. Wikasa emerged from the stable, wiping sweat from his brow. When he saw the rider, his body tensed. But he didn't run, just stood there, waiting. The man dismounted, slender, sharp-eyed. The kind of lawman who liked justice more than mercy, Clara Hart? He asked. She stepped forward slowly. Yes. He nodded at Wikasa. This man with you? He is. He got a name? She looked Wikasa's way. He gave the slightest nod. Wikasa, she said. The lawman's eyes narrowed. That's Lakota. He one of the Ghost Ridge survivors? Clara held her ground. He's not a criminal. I didn't say he was. The lawman paused. But I got orders to ask questions. Ghost Ridge was federal land. 23 men dead. Some say it was a betrayal. Others say it was a stand. You know what I think? Clara didn't answer. The lawman leaned closer. I think people don't forget who was standing last. Then he tipped his hat and rode off. But the air didn't settle after he left. It curdled. That night, Clara found Wikasa by the wildflower patch. He was crouched low, hands in the dirt, shoulders tight. They'll come back, he said without turning. I know. They'll ask if I'm worth protecting. She knelt beside him. You are. He looked at her. Even if it costs you everything again. She touched his chest. It's not about cost anymore. It's about truth. He looked away. Then you should know something. She waited. I wasn't just a scout. I was the one who lit the fire at Ghost Ridge. It was meant to be a warning. But it spread. Took their tents, their sons, even those who meant no harm. Her heart thudded. I've carried it every day since, he whispered. If you send me away, I won't blame you. She didn't speak for a long time, then she reached for his hands. They burned our name after Samuel died, called me cursed, cold, said I should have followed him into the ground. Her voice cracked. But I didn't, and I won't. He looked up, stunned. This ranch is not built on perfect pasts, she said. It's built on what we do now. And then, beneath the stars and the cold wind, he rested his forehead against hers. The fire had returned, but with it came a choice. The lawman would come again. Wikasa's past was not buried deep enough. And Clara, she had just learned how to live again, but freedom, real freedom, would demand a price neither had yet named. The town had gathered as towns do, not for celebration, but to watch, to judge, to whisper. Clara hadn't walked Main Street in months, not since the kerosene bottle smashed through her window. But today, she held her head high. Her hair was braided back, her hands were steady, and at her side stood Wikasa, shoulders squared, silent as ever, but no longer hiding in shadow. The lawman waited outside the church. His horse pawed the dirt. A handful of townsfolk lingered behind him pretending to loiter, but eyes sharp. You know why I'm here, the lawman said. Clara nodded. You came to arrest him. The man tilted his head. No warrant, just a message. His people crossed the border north. He's free to leave. But if he stays, the questions won't stop. Wikasa spoke then, voice low and calm. If I go, they forget me. If I stay, she pays for it. The lawman shrugged. That's about the size of it. A murmur rippled through the townspeople. Clara turned to Wikasa. I won't be your reason to disappear. His eyes softened. And I won't be the reason they burn your house again. She looked at the crowd, at their narrow eyes, tight lips and half-turned faces. Then she looked past them, to the hills, the trees, the open sky. "I don't belong to them," she said aloud. A few heads turned. "I never did." Then she took Wikasa's hand, pulled him gently forward, and walked through the crowd. Not fast, not like someone running, but like someone choosing. They left before sundown. No farewell, no fanfare. Just 2 horses, a saddlebag, and a future. She didn't take much. Only Samuel's letter, her father's Bible, and the carved buffalo stone Wikasa had given her in the snow. They rode for hours in silence, until the land began to rise and the pines grew thick. When they stopped, it was at the edge of a bluff where the stars came out clean and sharp over the valley below. There, in the blue hush of night, Wikasa built a small fire, and beside it, Clara took off her gloves and reached for his hands. "We could build a ranch here," she whispered. He smiled, not big, not wide, but full of something warm. "We could." They didn't say vows. They didn't speak promises. They simply stood beneath the stars, firelight flickering, and chose each other. No audience, no church pews, just wind, flame, and quiet understanding. Months later, a letter arrived at the general store in town. No return name, no detail. Inside was a single photograph, a small child sitting in the tall grass, face hidden by a wide-brimmed hat. Beside the child, 2 horses grazed. In the background stood a cabin, new, rough-hewn, but sturdy. On the back of the photo, in Clara's handwriting, were 5 simple words. "We named him Samuel Wikasa." She was never a curse. She was someone's miracle all along. Thanks for watching. If you have any suggestions to improve our videos, please let us know in the comments. We're a new channel and your feedback truly helps us grow.